This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Eid Mubarak to the folks celebrating the end of Ramadan. I missed y'all at the beginning of Ramadan, so clearly I'm trying to make up for the oversight. Here's what we got for y'all. Tonight, the president says he wants bipartisan harmony. But what exactly is the dynamic between Joe Biden and top Republicans? Plus, we're prepping for some jump scares with a look at the evolution of horror movies. But first, here's what you need to know right now. There's a trend this week. More states moving to make unemployment less enticing. Some are putting more requirements back in place, like proof that someone is actively searching for work, to keep the benefits. At least 8 states plan to take away the extra $300 a week for those unemployed by this summer. The American Rescue Plan, passed back in March, aimed to extend the enhanced unemployment benefits through early September. The governors in those states reining in benefits argue the extra money is keeping people from jumping back into the workforce. This all comes as several sectors struggled to find workers, and after a weaker than expected jobs report last month. Like we broke it down earlier this week, experts say there are a lot of factors holding folks back from returning to work, from childcare to fear of COVID to just flat out bad wages. The United Nations says violence in Israel and Gaza has the potential to turn into an all-out war. Israel's military targeted apartment buildings on the Gaza Strip in one of its latest airstrikes. It says the apartments house people and weapons affiliated with Hamas, which is the political entity that governs Gaza. But many civilians have been killed or left injured or homeless from the Israeli airstrikes. The death toll in Gaza stands at more than 45 Palestinians, some women and children. More than 300 people have been wounded. In recent days, militants based in Gaza have also launched hundreds of rockets into Israel. At least 6 people have been killed there. As neither side shows signs of backing down, the violence is looking eerily similar to the 2014 Gaza war. That 7-week conflict was one of the deadliest between Palestinians and Israelis in modern history. More than 2,000 Gazans were killed and more than 10,000 injured. On the Israeli side, there were 72 deaths and more than 700 were injured. The recent violence was first reignited after a series of confrontations in East Jerusalem between Israeli police and Palestinians. It looks like the New York Attorney General can move forward with a lawsuit against the National Rifle Association. On Tuesday, a federal judge dismissed the NRA's petition for bankruptcy, saying it was filed in bad faith to fend off the Attorney General's lawsuit.
Weeks of testimony have demonstrated that the NRA and its leadership simply filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy to avoid accountability.
Some context here. The NRA filed for bankruptcy just 5 months after New York's Attorney General launched a lawsuit that could dissolve the gun group. They accused the NRA of misusing millions of dollars in charitable funds for things like private jets and personal expenses for executives. The bankruptcy filing would have given the NRA some protections against the lawsuit and a chance to rebuild itself in Texas. The NRA is currently headquartered in Virginia, but has long been incorporated in New York, which means the chief law enforcement officer in that state, aka the Attorney General in New York, can step in on regulating the group. Quick break here, but when you're back, gas bags. America, home of the free, land of the stubborn. Here's what's trending. Despite experts and officials saying the hack on the Colonial Pipeline, a major US gas pipeline, is no reason to panic, some folks on the East Coast must have heard the exact opposite. Gas shortage 2021 is trending because people are being all toilet papery about gas and panic buying, leading to shortages, of course, and higher prices. The Colonial Pipeline supplies nearly half of all fuel consumed along the East Coast. The desperation over fuel has led the Consumer Product Safety Commission to urge people not to fill plastic bags with gasoline. If you're thinking, surely people aren't doing that, you are mistaken. What's wild is that bag don't even look steady enough to hold much of anything. Also, what's the refueling process gonna look like with bagged gas? Do you pour the gas into a bucket and then use a funnel, or I don't get it. Not even gonna lie, this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony is gonna be lit, y'all. The Rock Hall decided to piss off fewer people this year by inducting Tina Turner, Jay-Z, the Foo Fighters, the Go-Go's, Todd Rundgren, Carole King. Y'all young folk know Carole King, right? I feel the earth move under my feet. Yeah? No? Other inductees include Gil Scott-Heron in the Early Influence category and LL Cool J in the Musical Excellence category. This class is one of the most diverse in Rock Hall history, with women making up nearly half of the 15 inductees. From the Rock Hall's inception to 2019, just over 7% of the inductees have been women, which led Janet Jackson to call for more women in her speech in 2019. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony will be live this year after the pandemic shut all that down in 2020. You can catch the event on SiriusXM or on HBO October 30th. Ellen DeGeneres says she's planning to end her daytime talk show after the upcoming season, which will be the show's 19th. In a report published Wednesday, DeGeneres told The Hollywood Reporter, "As fun as it is, it's just not a challenge anymore." DeGeneres has wrestled with whether to end her show in the past. Low-key, I'd get sick of being TV nice and dancing awkwardly all the time too. But this announcement also comes after a year where she faced criticism for reportedly fostering a toxic workplace, something she apologized for at the start of season 18.
I learned that things happened here that never should have happened. I take that very seriously, and I want to say I am so sorry to the people who were affected.
Despite all of the recent controversy, the Ellen DeGeneres show has won 64 Daytime Emmy Awards, and DeGeneres herself has been honored with both a Presidential Medal of Freedom and a Carol Burnett Award for her outstanding work in TV. My horror movie fans know the pandemic was the perfect time to lean into being freaked out. I mean, after Hereditary, I won't look at light poles or tree houses the same. This year, fans of gory horror movies have something to look forward to. Spiral, the 9th installment in the Saw franchise. Newsy's Casey Mendoza talked to the director of Spiral to discuss the evolution of horror, gore, and, of course, Jigsaw.
Jigsaw? Wait, I thought the Jigsaw killer was dead.
He is.
Whether you're a glutton for gore or someone who covers their eyes during horror movies, chances are you know who this is. Jigsaw, the nightmare-inducing villain of the Saw franchise.
Let the game begin.
When I started off making the Saw films, gore and violence was a gimmick. I used it to try to gross out the audience, as well as one-up other horror filmmakers.
Darren Lynn Bousman is the filmmaker behind the second, third, and fourth films in the Saw franchise. And this year, he's back with Spiral, a new film in the franchise starring Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson.
Jigsaw copycat.
It relies on the mythology of the previous 8 films, but you can go into Spiral never seeing a Saw film.
Spiral is the 9th film in the franchise, which has long been a staple in the horror genre. Saw first debuted in 2004 from director James Wan. It was about a serial killer that tortured victims through games, and it was part of a new wave of horror films like The Devil's Rejects, Wolf Creek, and Hostel that led New York Magazine critic David Edelstein to popularize the phrase torture porn. The gimmick of gore and violence was built on the popularity of slasher films from the 80s and 90s, but focused even more on being unapologetically brutal.
I've lived a lot between the last movie and this one. I think coming around this time, the violence in Spiral is not a gimmick, it just serves the story.
More than a decade after directing Saw 4, Bousman says both the franchise and horror films in general have continued to evolve, bringing in new voices like Ari Aster, Robert Eggers, and Jordan Peele, who've each added more creative depth and a focus on storytelling to the genre.
The horror audience is so large now that, movies like Spiral work and movies like Hereditary work, and they can each have their own unique audience and still be part of that horror umbrella.
Casey Mendoza, Newsy, Chicago.
Anybody else turn off all their lights and sit on the couch vulnerably while watching horror movies? Just me? Okay, never mind. While the country's made progress in talking about mental health struggles, certain topics can still be a little uncomfortable for certain people. As a part of Mental Health Awareness Month, our Breakthrough series aims to address some of that discomfort by tackling some tough subjects. like suicide. Newsy's Amber Strong talks to experts about suicide and how to help somebody who may be struggling.
I just didn't want to be alive anymore. And that was a very clear and real and frightening, constant thought.
Over the past few years, the nation has gotten more comfortable discussing mental health. But for some, the topic of suicide can be difficult to navigate, especially in our personal lives.
I think sometimes we don't want to acknowledge when people express not wanting to live or wanting to hurt themselves or die. And so you do want to take that serious. Make sure that you check on them, monitor their safety. If there are medications around the home or if there are weapons in the home, making sure those are locked away.
One of the myths that people often fall into accidentally when thinking about suicide is they're worried that if they bring that up, they're actually putting that in someone's mind. The research actually shows us that's the complete opposite. You're not making someone more susceptible by bringing that up. If anything, you're giving them space to know that you are noticing and caring about it, and that can actually be effective to get people help.
Experts say when approaching a loved one, leave judgment at the door.
Oftentimes when people bring up thoughts about suicide, the response from family or friends is that, why are you suicidal? Like, your life is so great. The person is making their own interpretation about their life and what's going on and the situations that they may be struggling with. And so I think you want to just sort of offer that support for them.
One way to offer that support is by seeking professional help. You can start by calling the National Suicide Hotline 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Amber Strong, Newsy, Washington.
We're going to switch gears a bit and put our focus on President Biden. Here's a guy who's no stranger to politics. He ran for president twice before his 2020 win and spent more than 30 years in Congress, which means he's had to work across the aisle before. Biden has an ambitious agenda. So how exactly will his personal relationships with GOP leaders impact his ability to accomplish that agenda? Newsy's Willie James Inman takes a closer look.
For the first time since his inauguration, President Joe Biden hosted a meeting with congressional leaders of both parties at the White House.
Well, I'm happy to have the House and Senate leadership here.
It's also the first Oval Office visit for House GOP Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell since Biden's inauguration.
What the bottom line here is we're going to see whether we can reach some consensus on a compromise. And moving forward, we're going to talk a lot about infrastructure today.
The meeting comes as the president works to pass his massive and costly infrastructure proposal. But both Republican leaders have claimed they haven't seen much outreach up to this point. The president and the top-ranking Republican in the House have gone months without speaking. McCarthy complained that previous requests for meetings went ignored.
This is an opportunity to sit down with leaders from both parties, have a discussion, again, about common ground, how we can work together moving forward. He did talk to him around the joint address.
Political observers point out that President Biden's relationship with congressional Republicans is important not just for getting his agenda passed now, but for after the midterm elections that could shift the balance of power.
Both McConnell and McCarthy could be in the position of majority leader, or in McCarthy's case, speaker, come 2023. So it is important for Biden to cultivate relationships for the future, but the McConnell relationship is more immediately important for Biden. Any legislation that he hopes to get through, it's going to be critical for McConnell to be involved.
Complicating things even further is Mitch McConnell's recent vow to stop Biden's agenda.
100% of my focus is on stopping this new administration.
But the longtime Senate Republican has indicated he has some willingness to compromise. And those hoping for bipartisan solutions out of Washington say regular meetings could go a long way towards finding common ground.
We know what the realities are. And yet, for the sake of the country, you need to find a way to try to transcend some of that. And, part of that is carving out time to have communication.
Upon the conclusion of the meeting, both Republicans described the talks as a step forward, but drew a red line in the sand on how far they're willing to go.
Not to negotiate here, but you won't find any Republicans going to go raise taxes.
Willie James Inman, Newsy, Washington.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. Holler at me and let me know where y'all watching the show, especially if you're outside the US. Secretly, this is my way of building a network of friends who I can mooch off of during post-pandemic travel. Thousands of lawsuits have been filed against drug distributors seeking accountability in the opioid epidemic, which killed nearly 500,000 people between 1999 and 2019. One trial that's underway now could set the tone for other cases moving forward. National reporter Chloe Nordquist has more.
We have been ground zero. It's no secret that we're #1 in overdose deaths.
West Virginia has been hit hard by opioid addiction and overdoses. It's something Dr. Susan Bissett has seen firsthand.
I know friends that tell me that they've lost almost half of their kindergarten class. They're adults now, but when they look back, half of their kindergarten class is gone because of overdose.
She works around the clock as president of the West Virginia Drug Intervention Institute.
Safety guard. Naloxone costs a lot of money. Recovery costs a lot of money. Prevention in our schools costs money. It takes enormous resources to address this opioid epidemic.
The nonprofit does what it can, educating the community on topics like prevention and overdose reversal, sometimes to kids as young as 4, with the help of a pill bottle mascot seen in this video they provided.
Anybody here wear a hat?
A 250,000 Americans lost their lives to prescription opioid overdoses from 1999 to 2019. 500,000 if you include illegal opioids. In states like West Virginia, providers wrote more than 69 opioid prescriptions for every 100 people. In the capital of Charleston, local governments are suing big pharmaceutical distributors, accusing them of playing a role in this.
Suing the corporate players in a public health crisis, seeking to get recompense through the tort system for the costs that are imposed on the public health system and the law enforcement system.
Lucinda Finley is a law professor who's seeing these lawsuits pile up across the country.
There are thousands of lawsuits. More are being filed every day. West Virginia has been considered one of the hardest hit states. The litigation there play a very significant role in sort of setting a template for litigation in the rest of the country.
Lawsuits like this help local governments with the cost of fighting the epidemic.
There are a couple of major end goals. One is accountability. And then the other goal would be for the municipalities that are suing to try to get some money, yes, to help defray the growing costs.
But the suits don't directly help those who are addicted or their families.
If they were a part of creating a problem, then they should be a part of solving it.
Cece Brown lost her son Ryan to an overdose following a 7-year addiction.
And he died of a heroin overdose. And I didn't think about it until much later. He had come home to have some dental work done, and they'd given him, pain medicine with codeine in it. And I think about that now as to whether that made that, impacted that at all. I don't know.
As these lawsuits play out in federal court,
financial stakes are so high on all sides that there's a very strong incentive on all sides to try to settle.
Local organizations continue to spread awareness.
We have responsibility, whether that's personal responsibility, corporate responsibility, to turn this around, not just for West Virginia, but for the entire country. We are losing generations of persons due to this opioid epidemic.
I'm Chloe Nordquist reporting.
It's not often we feature folks from my home planet, but tonight you're in luck. One musician with a unique talent is using it to lift people's spirits. Or if you have no taste, just cause a racket. National reporter Elizabeth Ruiz tells us how he took his songs to the streets when the pandemic shut down everything else.
Hi, my name is Eric Haynes, and I am a one-man band.
Oh, just give me a rusty old banjo and I'll have the people tapping their feet.
The inspiration was probably Mary Poppins, but I didn't realize it at the time. I was just trying to figure out how to make it work.
When Eric Haynes makes his way down the street, he's like an ice cream truck, inviting all the kids to come out and play. He's written 30 songs and makes a living playing at fairs, festivals, comedy clubs, and corporate events.
And when I was building it, my wife was a little skeptical. She said, "Is there anybody doing this?" I said, "No." She says, "Do you know there's a market for it?" I said, "No, I don't. I haven't found anybody else who's doing it."
Ladies and gentlemen, Madame et Monsieur, meine Damen und Herren.
Since then, I have connected with one-man bands around the world. There's very few of us that do like a stand-up one-man band because it wears out your body really badly, but there's quite a few of us around the globe.
Eric says it took him about a month to put everything together. With the right angles and a whole lot of practice, he's in complete control of the banjo, hi-hat, bass drum, snare drum, and his large collection of bells and whistles.
Well, every step that I take is pulling on one of those straps. So it's like a little kind of baby steps thing that I'm going along, but that's how you keep rhythm with the song.
And to be happy, that's the key.
In his 11 years of being a one-man band, he's mastered the art of multitasking.
I have a really short attention span, and that's one of the keys to being a one-man band, because if you are someone who needs to focus on one thing at a time, you're gonna go crazy trying to figure out how to do everything at once.
Playing in his own community wasn't something he'd normally do because he travels as a full-time entertainer. But when everyone was asked to quarantine in the early months of the pandemic, he gifted his neighborhood with the cheery sounds of his music.
I wanna be a superhero, battling evil all day long.
I saw a news program that was talking about the Italians singing to each other from the balconies. And I thought, well, everybody is really stressed out about this. I'm just gonna go up and down the street and do what I do, and I'll be in the middle of the street way away from anybody so people can listen from their own house, and then at least they've got something to kind of lighten the load while they're sitting in their house sort of panicking.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Restrictions have been lifted as more people get vaccinated, and his performance schedule is picking up again. But his neighbors love the music so much, his trips around the block haven't stopped.
I feel that it's my job to lift people's spirits. I feel that is my calling. They have a sense that they're all in something together, and it's a pretty powerful thing for that.
In Everett, Washington, I'm Elizabeth Ruiz reporting.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with a special ITL episode for AAPI Heritage Month. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.